Okay. Hi, I'm Bob Kendrick, President, Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, Historic 18th and Vine, Kansas City, Missouri.
Perfect. Number one, the first question would be, what did you think when you heard the passing of Willie Mays?
Well, I was actually here in Birmingham where I'm recording this interview now. I got to Birmingham yesterday, went immediately over to Rickwood Field, where I took several former Negro League players on a clubhouse event to meet the minor league teams that were playing a game last night. Willie's son, Michael, was with the group and was recording some of the conversation that I was having with those Negro League players. He's a filmmaker into media. And so I noticed that he had left and the cameraman had left rather abruptly. Probably about a half hour later, they texted me to let me know that Mr. Mays had passed away and asked if I would not share that information. I'm sure as the family was trying to get together, formalize a statement and all that stuff. And so I sat on this for several hours before it was actually released to national media. But of course, when I got the news, it was like a punch in the gut. Even though he was 93 years old, there are just certain people that are just not supposed to die. I felt the same way when Buck O'Neil passed away. We know that no one's going to live forever, but if someone was going to live forever, it was going to be Buck, and it was going to be Henry Aaron, and it was going to be Willie Mays, even though we know that that's never the case. And so it hurt to lose a ball player the magnitude of Willie Mays, someone who is such an important part of the Negro Leagues experience. But when you say the name Willie Mays, particularly to those who got to see him play, the name alone brings a smile. And so while the occasion is somber, we must celebrate this amazing man, this amazing athlete. And we've got the grandest stage of them all. The world will be watching on Thursday. What a tremendous memorial service we will be able to give Mr. Mays as a send out, and to have those other former Negro League vets in attendance. Several played for the Birmingham Black Barons. This will resonate tremendously.
What did he ever say how he felt about his experience in the Negro Leagues and how it prepared him to become a major league player? Not that he wasn't a major league player already, but
yes.
How did he feel about his experience as a Birmingham Black Baron?
Well, you have to remember he was 17 years old when he joined the Birmingham Black Barons. He's patrolling center field. He's playing with and against grown men. And he would be the first to tell you that that experience prepared him for any and everything he was going to see at the major league level. The game actually got easier for him as he got to the major league, when you had to deal with not only competing against guys who were sometimes 10, 15 years your senior, and then the social conditions that they had to deal with. So by the time he gets to the major leagues, life had gotten a lot easier from a baseball playing perspective. And so he always had great appreciation for those Negro League players. And contrary to popular belief, there was no jealousy amongst that older Negro Leagues player. If anything, they would have lamented that the integration of the game came after their prime. They might have wished that it would have happened when they were still in their prime. But that older ball player, they basically took that young player under their wing, and they shielded them from the harshness of Jim Crow, and they nurtured them because they knew that they had an opportunity to get there. And players like Willie Mays, Henry Aaron, Ernie Banks, they took those Negro Leaguers with them in spirit, and they never forgot where they came from.
Did he ever say anything about the kinds of things he had to put up with when he first got to the major leagues?
I think his minor league experience was far more difficult than when he got to the major leagues, because he's playing in what was called the Sally League, the South Atlantic League. And it left, I think, a deep wound on Mr. Mays, the way that he was treated in that league. And years later, the Sally League finally convinced him to come back so that they could celebrate him, because they knew of that history of how he and other Blacks players who moved into the minor leagues had been treated. The minor leagues were far more challenging than getting to the major leagues. You got it from the fans' perspective a little bit in the major leagues. Maybe some players who just had not been accustomed to being around black ball players, maybe they harbored some kind of feelings there. But in those small rural towns, it was extremely challenging for those guys. And that's what he spoke more so than when he gets to the major leagues. Willie Mays could play. And it didn't take long for his Giant teammates to realize this man here can help us win. I don't care what color he is.
Exactly. Now, when you said when he got there, he realized, okay, I'm ready now. Did he ever have any doubts that maybe he got there too soon, or that the pitching?
He was ripping the minor leagues up. He was when they bring him up to the show, he's playing for the Minneapolis Millers, and he was hitting, I don't know, some ridiculous like 470 when they called him up, and he didn't want to go because the Millers were in contention to win the championship, and didn't want to leave his teammates. That's how competitive Willie Mays was. And they say, oh, no, man, you got to go. We got to bring you up to the big team. And of course, when he gets there, he gets out the gate a little slow. And I'm sure there's some doubt. I don't think the doubt was about the baseball playing, though. The doubt was, again, being in this social environment, even though he had gotten a little bit of acclimation. But now you're going up, the spotlight is on you. Everybody want to see what you got. We heard that you could play. Now let me see it. And it took him a little bit to get his legs up underneath him. And man, it didn't take long though. And Willie Mays just took off and he blossomed. And he's such a transcending kind of ball player. He transcended race. You know, you heard young white kids saying, I'm Willie Mays. Yeah, they didn't see Willie Mays, a black baseball player. They saw Willie Mays, a baseball player. And the images of him walking through Harlem and playing stickball with the kids. Just his movements on the field screamed athlete. We were talking about this earlier today. If you had never been to a baseball game before in your life, and you went to a game that Willie Mays was one of however many players that were on the field, chances are you were going to pick him out as somebody who was special. He could have had a bad game. He might have gone 0 for 4, but you would have said, you know, there's something about that guy. That was Willie Mays. Yeah, he had that it factor. And I was on doing an interview last night with Bob Costas, and Bob said Willie had told him that he made the easy plays look hard and the hard plays look easy because this was entertainment. He wanted to entertain the fans. You are going to see something special that then you are going to talk about. People measured times in their lives by Willie Mays. They named their children by Willie Mays. That's how special and iconic he was.
And it's a perfect baseball name too. It just rolls right off the tongue. It's easy to say, and there's no doubt who you're talking about when you say Willie Mays. It's not like, who's that guy?
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, everything that we've been talking about helped create the persona that in the minds and hearts of so many baseball fans, he is widely regarded as the greatest major leaguer of all time. And it gives me great pride that that particular iconic player comes out of the Negro Leagues, because in many ways, he helps me validate players who don't need validation, but for baseball fans who don't know them, he helps me validate the other lesser known stars of the Negro Leagues, because he comes from the same gene pool that these other great players came from, that unfortunately many folks just simply don't know about them because they don't know the true story of the Negro Leagues. Thankfully, folks, we've got a museum where that story is being told. And I encourage everyone to come and not only learn Willie's story, but those who preceded Willie and built that bridge that gave him the opportunity to come on and become the Say Hey Kid. But it all began in the Negro Leagues at 17, and his nickname at that time was Buck, Young Buck.
Now, I didn't know that. Did he ever say to anyone or to you that the play in the Negro Leagues was as good or better than the game he joined when he went to the major leagues in the early 50s?
Yeah, when we hosted the All-Star game in 2012, when Kansas City hosted the All-Star game, we did a piece that was ran prior to the national televised All-Star game. And Mr. Mays is quoted in that film saying, I played with guys who hit the ball harder, they threw harder, they ran faster than the guys that I played with in the major leagues. And so that's why he felt like he was well prepared. By the time he gets there, even though he was just in the Negro Leagues for a brief period of time, he pretty much seen it all. And so he felt like he was as prepared as he could possibly be. And the game slowed down for him. And in many ways, it got a little easier for him than it was. Obviously, he was maturing as a young man at the same time. And so, but he talked about that with great joy, as a way to help people understand the talent that was there in the Negro Leagues.
Did he ever say, or did he ever tell anyone, I feel like that when I was on the field, there was nobody better than I was. I was always going to be, or I felt like there was no one who was better than me, and I could handle anything anybody threw at me. Not in a bad sense.
Yeah.
Like if there was a guy who threw hard, I could hit that guy. If somebody, hit a rocket to the outfield, I could go catch it, that sort of thing. Did he have that innate sense that he was as good or better than anybody he ever played against?
I don't know if he ever said it, but you could tell that he believed that. But you know what? He didn't have to say it because his contemporaries were saying it for him. You talk to the greats of the game. You talk to Frank Robinson. You talk to Mickey Mantle. You talk to all those guys, because you got to remember, during that era, we're talking some of the biggest stars in Major League Baseball history. They're competing against each other, and they're playing with each other. And you talk to his peers, they will tell you for him. He didn't have to say it. They will all tell you, who's the greatest baseball player? Willie Mays. Yeah, and it didn't take any hesitation. They didn't have to think about it. It just rolled right off their tongue. But you could tell that the kids would call it swagger. He had it. Yeah, no, he had it. He was a thoroughbred. When he walked out on the field, where I remember going to my first horse race ever with the late, great Buck O'Neill. Mm-hmm. We're in San Diego, and you saw the horses before they got into the gate. And you can see the horses that thought that, yeah, no, this is me. Yeah, y'all gonna have to deal with me today. That was Willie. He didn't have to say anything, but you could tell that he knew he had the goods, and the others knew that he had it as well.
Do you think, and this, I know your time is probably short, but do you think that the younger players today realize just how good he was and how much of an impact he had on the game?
I think they're learning. I think they're learning now. And it's almost poetic that a day before he passed away, we revealed that he was now being added into the video game, MLB The Show 24, playing as a member of the Birmingham Black Barons in Rigwood Field. So now a legion of young folks who would not have known about Willie Mays, and some of them are current Major League players because they play the video game, that they will now have an opportunity to learn even more. And obviously all the attention that his passing is bringing will help elevate greater awareness, I think, in their minds. And I think they will embrace the fact that Willie Mays could have played baseball in any era. He'd have been a star in this day. He'd have been probably the game's biggest star in the way the game is being played today, just as he was when he came to the major leagues as a kid coming out of the Negro Leagues. He's that kind of transcending ball player.
Did he ever talk about what it was like after baseball? Did he ever talk about his life after baseball? Did he miss the game, or was he happy? Was he happy with what he was doing?
I think all great players miss the game. Mm-hmm. You miss the adulation. You miss the cheers. that come along with it, outside of the other things, financially, that come along with the game. And obviously, he found other things later in his life away from the game. But as he would go on to say, I just wanted to play baseball my entire life. At some point, your body just won't let you play baseball anymore. And as we know, Father Time is undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
But Willie, I think, will always, when he was with us, he always felt like he was still a ball player.
If you had one thing to tell people about Willie and his impact on the Negro Leagues and the Negro Leagues Museum, what would that be?
Well, he becomes that iconic figure that is such an eye opener when so many fans learn that his career began in the Negro Leagues. And I think the fact that his passing will likely draw more people to now want to visit the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum to learn more about him, but also those, again, who preceded him. And that's a beautiful thing. And I hope that all of us will celebrate his life. There'll be a big party on Thursday there at Rigwood Field, as it should be. And I'm thrilled that I and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum will play a great role in that celebration of the life of the Say Hey Kid.
I have to ask you this, is it, and because I didn't get to ask you this before, obviously, but isn't it so cool that all those stats are now a part of Major League Baseball and people can see themselves how good those players were?
No, it was a watershed moment when the statistics of the Negro Leagues were rolled into the annals of Major League Baseball's history books, because again, it brought greater historical validation to the talent that was in the Negro Leagues. And all of a sudden you saw these names of yesteryear that moved ahead of many great Major League contemporaries that people did not know their names. And again, I hope that the stats are just a gateway into a deeper understanding and learning of the Negro Leagues. And I think it just makes the museum that much more special. And so I hope people will come and walk through those doors to learn about these ball players that you should have known about, but to learn a story that has escaped the pages of American history books. The story itself is bigger than baseball, even though it's just a tiny part of the great story of the game of baseball.
But the history of the Negro Leagues is sort of the history of the horrifying reality of segregation in America. And then, as we transition into a little bit better time, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is the history of America, essentially, through baseball.
It really is. It's America, as I like to say, it is America at her worst, but it's also America at her triumphant best. This story only could have happened in America. And it's based on one simple principle. You won't let me play with you in the major leagues, then I'll create a league of my own. And that's exactly what they did. So the American spirit is what really drives this story. And I think when guests come and walk through the museum, that's what they walk away. They walk away, as I like to say, cheering the power of the human spirit to persevere and prevail. What's not to love about those kinds of stories?
What is the one or two things you want people to know about the Negro Leagues Museum that they may not know now, that you guys have now, that you may not have had a year or 2 or 5 years ago, that would draw them back? You say, look, you need to come see this.
Well, I think the first thing that I hope people will embrace is that we have one of the nation's most preeminent civil rights, social justice institutions. It's just seen through the lens of baseball. But at its crux, that is what it is. It is a civil rights, social justice story. Now, of course, when you walk through that museum, you don't have to be a baseball fan. Now, we believe that that's sacrilegious, but you don't have to be a baseball fan. If you are a fan of American history, you're going to love the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. If you are a fan of the underdog overcoming adversity to go on to greatness, you're going to love the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. But man, if you are a baseball fan to boot, as we say in the South in Georgia, you're going to be in hog heaven. It combines all of those worlds, and it's a piece of history that had escaped the pages of American history books. As my late mother would say, you don't know what you don't know. And that's what happens when people come through that museum. They leave saying, I didn't know that. Of course you didn't know that. It's not there to be documented, but we're there to substantiate it. And so we hope that more people, through the eyes of Willie Mays and those other heroes of the Negro Leagues, many of them who have passed on, that this will be a motivating factor for people to want to come and learn more about the history of the Negro Leagues. And I hope walk through those turnstiles at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
This will be the last question, but I got to ask you, did he ever say, of all the players he played with in the Negro Leagues, who was the best player he either A, played with or saw play? Because I know his dad was a really good player too.
Yeah, no, Satchel Paige. Yeah, Satchel Paige.
Really?
And he told me this story. I'm in San Francisco. It had to be around 2019, 2018. It was before COVID. And they arranged time for me to have private time with Mr. Mays. We're down in the Players Garage. And I'm being hosted by a big-time San Francisco sports talk show radio host named Brian Murphy. And so Willie's feeling pretty good that day. And Murphy asked him, he says, Willie, did you ever face Satchel Paige? Oh, and Willie lights up like a Christmas tree. He said, yeah, I faced Satchel. I faced Satchel when I was 17 years old. The first time I faced Satchel, I got a double off of it. Well, Satchel didn't know who this kid was. He grooves one in, young Willie Mays hits it in the gap, gets a double. Satchel looks over at the third baseman and says, hey, man, you let me know when he comes back up. Couple innings later, here comes young Willie Mays. Third baseman said, hey, Satch, there he is. Satchel says, son, I ain't going to try to trick you. I'm going to throw you 3 fastballs. And even at 17, Mr. Mays saying to himself, you going to throw me 3 fastballs and I know they're coming? He says, Satchel threw 3 straight right by me. I never saw him. And he says, on the third strike, Satchel is now halfway between the mound and home plate. And Willie says, as he turned to go back to the dugout, Satchel looks at him and says, now, son, go sit down, little boy.
But did he have other than Satchel, did he have a favorite player that he enjoyed watching when he was playing? Did he ever say like Aaron or somebody?
He would credit the great Piper Davis, who was part of the Birmingham Black Barons. Piper Davis was managing the Barons, had been a great player himself, and Piper Davis is credited with having taught, I should say, a young Willie Mays how to hit the curveball. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Piper was one of his big mentors. Reverend Bill Greason, who is still with us. He's 99 years young. He'll be at the celebration on Thursday. Also was a tremendous mentor of Willie Mays, and the great Monty Irvin, Hall of Famer Monty Irvin. When Willie gets to the New York Giants, Monty became like a father figure for Willie Mays. So there were a lot of folks who had great influence on Willie Mays.
I got to be honest with you. When I think about guys like Monty Irvin, it makes me very sad. You know, I think about all these guys, and I think they should have been playing. They should have been playing
well before the doors open up for them.
Yeah. They should have been playing Josh Gibson.
Absolutely.
Oscar Charleston. Did I say his name right? Oscar Charleston.
Oscar Charleston,
all
absolutely.
those guys.
All those guys. And as baseball fans, we were cheated because we should have seen the best players take the field to play with and against one another. And how much better would our game have been if those doors had opened sooner? And the thing about the stats being rolled into the record books, I had always said that had the doors opened sooner, the record books would be entirely different. Well, Major League Baseball reopened those doors, and guess what? The record books are entirely different now.
That's exactly right, and that's the way it should be. It just boggles my mind. I just can't get my head around that at all, that those guys didn't get to play. It's just nuts. It's nuts. Yeah. It's like, it would be like the NBA without all those guys in the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Well, of course it would be. But you know what? Those players never lamented that. They loved playing the game. They got an opportunity to play it in the Negro Leagues. And as fate would have it, the Negro League would fuel those hopes and dreams for a young Negro League star like Willie Mays to get the opportunity to pursue his major league career.
Man, I just can't thank you enough. You're
welcome.
The best. If anything ever happens to you, I don't know what the heck is going to happen to the museum, because you are the museum. You know,
Well,
I mean, you're the face, the body, and the soul of the museum. So, I mean, we got the best guy to talk to about this. So thank you so much.
Man, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got it.
I look forward to seeing you guys when I get back to KC.
Rocking. Thanks so much. Thanks.
All right, you got it? I got it?
I got it.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.